Okay, well, we finished the most common types of three-note chords, the major and the minor. Remember that a chord is, by definition, three or more notes played at the same time. There are other three-note chords besides major and minor, and they're built by relating them to the major and minor chords. So I'd like to go through those quickly so that you'll have seen all of the types of three-note chords that can be built before we move on. One of the remaining three-note chords is called a diminished chord. Diminished chord. The word diminish means to reduce in size. And in this context, you'll see why that makes sense. The diminished chord is based on, the easiest way to think of it is to think of a minor chord. Start with a minor chord, and then to build the diminished chord, all you do is lower the last note 1/2 step. So you remember that a major chord is the first, third, and fifth notes of this major scale. So here we've got C, E, and G. And a minor chord is the first, the flat third, and the fifth note from that scale. So in other words, to build the minor, you just lower the middle note 1/2 step. Well, the diminished is the first, the flat third, and the flat fifth, or the diminished perfect fifth. And so what that means is all you have to do is take the last note, which is the fifth note of the scale, and reduce it by 1/2 step. So the easiest way to think of it is take the minor chord and then lower the last note 1/2 step. My example would be, here's C major, C minor would be C, E flat, and G, and C diminished would be C, E flat, and G flat. And this is true for any diminished chord you want to build. Start with the minor and then reduce it 1/2 step, and you'll get the diminished. And just by way of note, the symbol for a diminished chord, the easy one to recognize is D-I-M, which is short for diminished. So if you see like C dim or G dim or whatever, that means diminished. But one that they use that's shorter but harder to remember is the circle. So C with the circle above it would mean C diminished, or any other letter. G diminished would be G with the circle, and so on. So just to be clear, let me run through the white keys, the naturals, and show you how to make diminished out of those. And then remember the rules for doing the black keys. You can either raise one 1/2 step or lower one 1/2 step and get that one. Anyway, so you start with the minor. So C minor we already did, so let's move on to D. D minor is D, F, and A. So in order to build the diminished, we lower the last note 1/2 step, so it'd be D, F, and A flat. E minor would be E, G, B. In order to build the diminished, we lower the last one 1/2 step, so it would be E, G, and B flat. F minor would be F, A flat, and C. So in order to build that, we would lower the C 1/2 step, so it would be F, A flat, and C flat. And of course, notice that C flat ends up being B natural, but we call it C flat so that everything works out with the names of the notes. The next chord would be G minor, which would be G, B flat, and D. So in order to build G diminished, we would drop the last note 1/2 step, and it would be G, B flat, and D flat. Let me get my fingers out of the way. The next one would be A minor. So to build an A diminished, we would lower the last note, which would be an E, 1/2 step. So we'd have A, C, and E flat is A diminished. The next minor on the natural notes is B minor, so that's B, D, and F sharp. In order to build the diminished, we drop the last note 1/2 step, and so for B diminished we would have B, D, and F. And notice too that this diminished chord is all white notes. And we'll get back to that later, but that ends up being important in another context. So that's how you build diminished chords. It's pretty simple once you understand minor chords.